Hey, welcome in. Well, here's the headline. Tucker Carlson calls for 25th Amendment to be invoked. Now, the Democrats and the legacy media were just crazy for the 25th Amendment while Trump was in power. Let's take a look at some headlines. January 7th, 2021, Pelosi calls for invoking the 25th Amendment. Again, CNN, what's the 25th Amendment and how does it work? This was January 11th, 2021. Here's one. The 25th Amendment requires political apocalypse from CNN. 2018. And this is all just CNN, okay? Here's a clip. Could 25th Amendment remove Trump as president? 2018, what the 25th Amendment could mean for Trump. Chuck Schumer calls for 25th Amendment to be used. A second Trump impeachment versus the 25th Amendment. Opinion, the 25th Amendment isn't good enough for Trump. So it was not Tucker Carlson who started all this 25th Amendment talk. But he has definitely noticed that, the world seems to be falling apart in a very short amount of time since Biden took over. And Biden seems to be quite confused.
But first, let's check in with the leader of the free world who is sane, healthy, and not in any way suffering from cognitive decline.
You got the vaccination?
Yeah.
Are you okay? I mean, you seem, no, it works. Or or the mom and dad, or the neighbor, or when you go to church, or when you're, I really mean it. There are trusted interlocutors. Think of the people. If your kid wanted to find out whether or not there's a man on the moon or whatever, something, or, whether those aliens are here or not, who are the people they talk to beyond the kids who love talking about it?
So now he's calling for the 25th Amendment, which should not even be controversial because polling seems to suggest that the majority of Americans don't see Biden as mentally capable of doing his job. But what do you need to invoke the 25th Amendment? Well, let's go to that CNN article we just saw. What's the 25th Amendment and how does it work? Now, of course, they were rooting for this to be used against Trump, as you can see from this article, to forcibly wrest power from Trump, but we'll just replace Trump with Biden here. So to forcefully wrest power from Biden, Pence would have to be on board, so the vice president would have to be on board. So they'd need Kamala. I'm not sure at this point she'd actually even want to be president. And I'm not sure anybody else would want her to. The cackling would literally never end. But they would need Kamala. Okay. Now let's see. She would also need a majority of, we'll say, Biden's cabinet officials to agree the president is unfit for office and temporarily seize power from him. So she would need a majority of cabinet officials. Let's see. Biden could dispute the move with a letter to Congress. And then Kamala and the cabinet would then have 4 days to dispute him. Congress would then vote. It requires a 2/3 supermajority, usually 67 senators and 290 House members, to permanently remove him. That's not going to happen. Congress could also appoint its own body to review the president's fitness ahead of the cabinet. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, during the last Congress, introduced a bill to create a congressional body for this purpose, but it was not signed into law. So, no, this isn't going to happen. But anyway, let's get into this. On the same day, President Joe Biden used cheat sheets, including one marked Tough Putin Q&A talking points. Boy, oh boy. To field questions from the media, Fox News host Tucker Carlson said it's time to take action. Anyway, Carlson said that top lawmakers and cabinet members should invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Biden, who said last week that President Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power. Let's take a look at his big gaffes. Let's see. Joe Biden's 3 biggest blunders in Europe. Blunder number 1, Biden calls for regime change in Russia. Speaking in Warsaw, Poland on Saturday, President Biden said of Russian President Vladimir Putin, quote, "For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power." And then immediately, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said, quote, "As you know, and as you've heard us say repeatedly, we do not have a strategy of regime change in Russia, or anywhere else for that matter." So that's Biden being directly contradicted immediately by his Secretary of State, because he said something insane. Blunder number 2, Biden suggests U.S. troops are being sent to Ukraine. That's not very good.
And you're going to see when you're there, and some of you have been there, you're going to see women, young people standing in the middle of front of a damn tank, just saying, I'm not leaving. I'm holding my ground. They're incredible.
A White House spokesperson responded to this, quote, the president has been clear. We are not sending U.S. troops to Ukraine, and there is no change in that position. Well, what the hell was he talking about then? But at least somebody contradicted him immediately and said, no, not what he said. Blunder number 3. Biden warns of a possible chemical weapons attack against Russia.
And to clarify on chemical weapons, if chemical weapons were used in Ukraine, would that trigger a military response from NATO?
It would trigger a response in kind. Whether or not you're asking whether NATO would cross, we'd make that decision at the time.
A response in kind? What? Chemical weapons? I don't know. He feels a little bit 25th Amendment-y there, doesn't he? But anyway, a national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, said, quote, no intention of using chemical weapons, period, under any circumstances. When asked about President Joe Biden's comment Thursday that he would respond in kind if Russia used chemical weapons in Ukraine. So, I don't know. Again, it all feels a bit 25th Amendment-y to me, which is kind of a big deal considering that what he says affects the whole world. So this is the kind of stuff that Carlson's talking about. Anyway, Carlson wrapped up his segment with this, quote, all right, joke's over. Too much is at stake. If there was ever a time, if there was in U.S. history ever a time to invoke the 25th Amendment, it is now. As Joe Biden himself put it, for God's sakes, this man cannot remain in power. For all of our sakes. And I gotta say, Biden does not seem with it. He really doesn't. He certainly doesn't seem to be in control. He doesn't seem to be the one making any decisions. Part of the problem here is you get rid of Biden and then you've got Kamala. And I'm not sure that cackling to Armageddon is any better than sleepwalking towards it. There is a link to Tucker's segment in the description if you want to check it out. But anyway, that's all I got to say about that. Please subscribe, like, and share. That really helps me out. If you just like to listen, there's the podcast Radio Baloney. It's on pretty much every platform. If you look for it, you will find it. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.